Apple, Amazon, reporting yesterday good revenue numbers from both. But of course, the main focus on the calls was the ongoing coronavirus pandemic and the impact going forward. Joining us right now for her big tech takeaways for this week is Swisher, Recode executive editor, co-founder, and just announced launching a podcast with the New York Times starting in July. In addition to the work she does in her column, she's also a CNBC contributor. And of course, wherever she is, it must be sunny, even at 6:30 in the morning.
You're lucky I'm here, Andrew. It's early.
Thanks for coming on. My favorite line, and you don't see this in a press release this often, is Jeff Bezos saying, "You may want to take a seat," and then goes on to really talk about how the company plans to basically take the $4 billion it was going to make and reinvest it in the business, mostly in the form of really trying to work on making the pandemic better to the extent it can deal with PPE for its employees, testing its employees, a big program there. The question is, how should investors feel about that? How should the public feel about that? What's the ramification of that?
Well, welcome to Jeff Bezos. I think you and I have covered him for a long time, and he thinks this is the best thing. And I think their biggest probably weakness is dealing with workers. And that's been something that's happened long before this and may happen long after this. And I think they have to have an indication, given how the surge in revenue and how well they're doing in that regard, that they sort of lock everything down. And so I would imagine with Bezos, who's apparently now really quite running the company after having stepped away, is saying this is the time to spend and make sure that we're going to take advantage of these gains that we're getting during the pandemic crisis, which I think of all the companies, Amazon is the one that's going to, I hate to say this, benefit the most through this and get people onto Prime and everything else. And so this is what he does. This is how he does. And he doesn't think as much about returning money to investors as Apple does.
So you said you hate to say this, and I think that's because you don't, typically when we've had these conversations, you don't love the idea of market dominance. I'm curious whether you think that there will be a shift in perception, though, of Amazon or any of the tech behemoths and the whole tech backlash, or techlash as they call it, given the role that some of these companies like an Amazon is playing, and its essential role, arguably, during the crisis. Does that change the political winds at all?
Well, I write about that today. I have a column coming out in the Times talking about that. No, I still don't like it. It wasn't right before this happened, and it isn't right after. I don't know what's changed that we have to allow one or two companies to dominate everything and not allow as much innovation. I do think, you saw last week around Amazon, there was a lot of noise from Washington, and there's some bills about consolidation and everything else. But the combination of this financial might these companies have, and you see this in these results, even though they're pretty good compared to what's going on right now for all of them, I think. That they have the ability to withstand this. And then when everything comes out and everybody is limping, they're going to be running down a very clear highway. And so you still have to be thinking about the same things that were happening before this and not necessarily change them going forward.
Can I push back on just one thing you said, which is, I typically don't like dominance either, but I do think they, are providing an essential service, and a service, frankly, that most other companies are incapable of providing in an environment like this, in part because they don't have the size and the scale. And so when you are in the midst of a pandemic like this, you actually end up having to look at a giant. Even Walmart's e-commerce business is not nearly as robust and have the same type of ability to get stuff to people. And so you do look at an environment like this and say, wow, that's actually maybe, and it's made me actually try to rethink some of these issues.
Well, rethink what? That you want one company to dominate everything, and then when everything is over, that there aren't enough companies allowed to compete. I think I'm a competition person, and I think that robust competition leads to innovation. And by the way, Amazon's been astonishingly innovative comparatively to many large companies. But the fact of the matter is, just like we didn't like Microsoft dominating everything or Google dominating search, or, you can go back, AT&T, Standard Oil. It's not good for one company to own everything. And I think that doesn't change because of the pandemic, just because they're really good at delivering. And the reason they're really good is because they're dominating. And post this, when we're trying to recover, the inclination will be to let them be giant, let them all be giant. But the implications down the road are not good for definitely not for innovative startups, definitely not for a marketplace, and definitely not for the creation of new companies. I just don't see it.
What's the Swisher hot take on Apple? Are you of the view that there's going to be
maintenance. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I think it's maintenance.
I was just going to ask you.
And they're doing, they did a good job, but I don't think, I think what Amazon's turning in is really impressive. In this case, they're rewarding shareholders. They didn't do as badly. China looks a little better. Services look better. But a lot of it is I just interviewed Alex Kantorowicz about his new book, and he calls Apple a company of refinement and not necessarily innovation. I don't agree completely, but they definitely turned in certainly a solid quarter, given the impact of everything that they have.
Is there another company out there that you think is there another company out there that you think is being more innovative right now?
I think Netflix. Netflix. I think Netflix has shown, talk about preparing for something and having the goods when something happened. Their products are great. I just did an interview with Ryan Murphy, who they did a big deal with. It's appearing today. I think Netflix is, to me, a really fascinating company.